Good evening. We're gonna go ahead and call our work session to order and turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Hunt.
All right, thank you to everyone that's here. I'm glad to see a lot of staff members. Just want to thank everyone. I'm going to save the good news for Todd to share a little bit about our advanced ed visit, but I want to say a very special thank you to our board members as well as our staff who made time on Monday to be here and to share. A whole lot of preparation went into that, and it was a very, very good visit, so I'll let Todd say that and share more with you with our advanced ed accreditation visit. Just a reminder, this isn't even on the agenda, but just want to mention that our board meeting is Monday evening, and it will be at West Jackson Elementary School, so if you'll make note of that. And it begins officially at 6:30, but Dr. Hardigree wanted to make sure that I extended an opportunity, encouraged any staff members and board members if they could be there early. They'll start tours at 6 o'clock, and they have students who are leading tours of some of the STEM work. West Jackson Elementary School was a GOSA grant recipient, and they have done some outstanding work, and they really would like to have an opportunity to share that with you. So, 6 o'clock Monday at West Elementary, and then 6:30 will begin our board meeting. Also, graduation dates there. Believe it or not, this year has gone by quite quickly. Just wanted you to go ahead and pencil that in your calendar, Thursday and Friday. East will be on Thursday and Jackson County on Friday. That is the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, so that's kind of a tough time, but hopefully folks have it on their calendar. Before we leave the concept here of calendar, I wanted to ask the board's, basically your opinion of. Good afternoon, thank you.
Hello.
Mr. Claire said let us know he was running a couple of minutes late, so we got a packed agenda and decided to start just getting started. The board has lots of meeting dates and trainings, and especially the fact that we have 3 new board members. I want to do what's most efficient for you all in terms of communication and efficiency of distribution. I feel like I'm handing you another piece of paper every time we have another meeting. And so I set up a Board of Education calendar in Google that would push out to your calendars all of the items that I feel like you need to put on your calendar, and then all you would have to do is accept those. Before I populated that for the whole year, I wanted to ask if that's something that you would find helpful. I don't know how you, okay, so if you don't have a Google, everyone has a Google account because you have a JCSS Google account. So you can use your personal or you can use your JCSS Google account, but I think it would be more efficient for us that we're not handing you so much paper and you've just got something on your mobile unit, whatever you use, whether it be an iPad or a phone that will have your, so Amanda and I will work together, Amanda, and she's put it up there. You can see there that we've put it in blue, and the only things that we'll put on there for you are district-wide major big events, so that you're aware of big events that are happening that impact the district, not individual schools, because that'll make you crazy. But even though you can go on individual schools' websites and see things, and then we'll put our board meetings and our board trainings and dates and times and locations. So if you're ever trying to schedule life, you all have busy lives, you'll have that in the palm of your hands. So we'll proceed with that. The second item here, item number 2 is boundary adjustment, and we talked about this at our retreat last week, or maybe it's been 2 weeks now. And if you'll notice in your packet, I'm providing you some information, and again, suggestion for board member that I think is excellent, and that is kind of, you have the executive summary for us to adjust the lines for between South Jackson and East Jackson Elementary School. Some rationale there, some reasons why. David and Martha, is Martha here? I thought I saw Martha. Yeah, there's Martha. David and Martha have worked diligently to make sure we are absolutely accurate with this. And the process that you'll see is a planning timeline. And what we'd like to do is for you to review this, and with your blessings, we would like to go ahead and begin meeting with parents and give them an opportunity to fill out House Bill 251. Our recommendation is we go ahead and zone based on what you see here, and you'll see the change. You've got the existing line as it is, and then you've got a second copy that shows you proposed area 1 and proposed area 2. And in those two, there's a brown area and basically a top pink, I guess, area. Those are already students who live much closer to South Jackson. And as we have new students moving to the area, they ask, why do I have to go all the way over there to East? This school is right here. So what we'd like is to go ahead and establish that adjustment in the boundary line for all new students who come in, and also change our transportation so that those kids are transported by Jackson County. If there are children whose parents can provide transportation and would wish for their children to stay at East, they can do that. If somebody doesn't want their child to move, then we'll allow them to use the House Bill 251 process to stay at East Elementary. But this accomplishes several things. It cleans up a little bit of the transportation in terms of having to transport so far. All of these families have asked if they could go to South, and that makes it quite clean, and we're able to provide them transportation. So we've given a copy of the letter that we'd like to send to these parents. We've also set 2 meetings that I will go to and allow these parents to ask any questions and talk to Ms. Brookshire and to get a tour of the building, anything that they want. But wanted you to have that to review, and if you'll review it between now and Monday, if you have any recommendations or thoughts, we'd like to make that boundary adjustment an action item for Monday, but want you to feel very comfortable with it, so. And we'll have personal conversations with these families. There's a total of approximately 140 potential students. I don't think all of them, Martha has done a great job of meeting with, and we've met several times with Ms. Howie at East Elementary. We know the kids who are already car riders, who will probably continue to be car riders and go to East. That'll be easy, but it'll just be an evolution over time for as kids move in. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call. I think it's the right thing to do for those kids, and it'll help us too in terms of balancing the enrollment in those 2 schools.
May I ask a question
Sure,
about that, Dr. Allen?
sure.
So what's the student load at South Jackson already? Are they gonna be able to absorb that 140 kids?
They are, and we met with Ms. Brookshire about that. They can probably comfortably hold 720, 750 kids, and they're under 600 right now. They're right at, you've got the enrollment, so
Yes.
probably,
They're like 620.
right at 620, that's
Their
right.
staff enough for?
We'll move staff.
We'll have to
we
move
can
some staff there.
Yeah, we'll move staff.
But we'll look to see where it's needed, which
Sure.
grade level.
Okay.
We'll move teachers.
Thank you for,
Sorry, Senator.
no, that's what
As
you.
far as, facility, they've got more space there really
They do,
than,
they do,
than at East Elementary.
they do.
And it's Jefferson River Road, you know,
Yes, ma'am.
that's the area.
And you know, this isn't a conversation for today, but I took our lead evaluator to Maysville Elementary School on Monday, whatever day they toured on Tuesday. And I was walking around Maysville, and East Jackson Elementary School is a wonderful school, South Jackson is a wonderful school. Maysville is doing some amazing work, and so, but we probably have 400 empty seats in that building. So at some point, if we have to reevaluate, we're gonna get to a place as we grow that we have to evaluate zoning to maximize capacity. So don't wanna do it right now, wanna let families stay sit as long as they can, but that is an option for the future if we find it's needed. And the other thing, I think as that school continues to show amazing progress, it would be a point of pride for families, because Maysville's making a lot of progress, so, great question. Another example of more dates, and so that calendar's gonna be great, Amanda and I will look forward to a task to get that all populated. We were scheduled, as you know, to have our parent advisory council this evening, and I've sent multiple emails to make sure folks know that we wanted to change that. Several reasons for that. One, many of them came in Monday as part of our interviews for the advanced ed visit. I felt like we were kind of tapping them. In addition to that, our January meeting was a training, our February work session was a training. We've not had a work session to speak of, and I was thinking it would be good for us to spend some time as a board going through some items without being rushed to get done by 6:45 or 7. So Dr. Cook is scheduled for our third 2-hour whole board training. So if you'll recall, we had one early on before our board members came on board. This will be, Dr. Cook says, if everyone's there, this can count as a whole board training, because there's been 3 2-hour sessions. This one will focus on personnel, and that will help us both with board training as well as there's a requirement, as you know, for a local orientation for new board members, so that will serve that purpose as well. And then we will have, so you'll notice there, if you'll mark your calendars, and if that's it might be inconvenient, I'd like to know if you can let me know ahead of time, we can figure it out. We start an hour earlier and do our whole board training from 5 to 7, and then our parent advisory council at 7. And so that will, again, our work session will be impeded, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. GSBA, the board, needs to decide whether or not that's something you would like to attend. We haven't in the past recent few years, and again, that's completely up to you all. And if everybody goes, there are whole board sessions that can count, or individuals can go and count it as individual training, and the Board of Education can pay for your registration and travel. So we just leave that out there. Registration's not quite open yet, but I wanted to at least bring it to your attention. And then, of course, the next item goes in line with the April 11th training. Because we had to reschedule our DOE retreat, which was originally a whole day, and we kind of scaled it down a little bit, and it focused primarily on preparation for advanced ed visit, we did not get to the depth that I feel like we really need to in order for us to finalize, and we won't finalize, but we will get a whole lot closer in terms of our personnel allocations and the need and what that impact will be with the budget. So we had originally asked the board to kind of reserve Friday, March the 22nd for our spring retreat. It definitely will not take all day. If you could look at your calendars, and you don't have to do it right now, but if we could just find a window of 2 hours that day, whether it be 7:30 to 9:30 in the morning, if it's, 3 to 5 in the afternoon, whatever kind of 2-hour block you all can help us commit to, we need to be able to give our principals feedback on how many positions we're going to allow them to have, because if we don't do it till April, they'll be hiring in May, and that's not good. We need them to go ahead and get those positions approved and posted and ready for them to start searching. So I'll leave that for you to let me know what time of the day. And if March 22nd doesn't work, we need to do it before spring break. That's the critical piece, that we get our board members, our principals some information to proceed with hiring. So if that date can work and you can tell me a time, great. If we need to find another time, then I'll do a doodle scheduler and we'll try to find a time that meets everybody's needs.
Is there a reason it has to be from 9 to 5? It's hard for me to take off work.
Right.
As much as
Right.
I have to sometimes. So, is there a reason it can't be after?
It certainly can.
hours?
It certainly can. It can be 5:30 to 7:30.
Okay.
If that would work better. I can do it on a Friday night.
Friday night.
Well,
9:37.
Doesn't have to be on
How much
Friday.
further that
There's
Yeah.
4 other bit working.
Only mad
days.
Well, would March the 22nd work for everybody?
Yeah, I was just texting April, 8 to 10 works for me, but I guess I can.
I
box
can
out.
take off work, but, it's not something I like to ask, constantly.
Yeah.
I've already had to do it one time this month,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
Mike, did you say you were gonna be?
I'm gonna be in Westwood.
Oh, all day that day?
22nd.
Oh, so, well, if we need everybody here, then
we,
what do we think? What do you think?
I think, is there a possibility of, if I hear Mr. Pilot, a request for like what time, 5, 6?
I can 5 o'clock after this, and if I could take off, as long as I'm not taking off a lot of time.
Right.
So, I can do 4 o'clock comfortably, but, it's,
Potentially Monday the 25th, like 4:30 to 6:30?
that works for me.
You name it, and we'll be there.
I hate to be the one, but
Well, no.
I'm counted on pretty heavily.
Excellent.
Yeah, that whole week
You
is
got
late.
it, don't worry. You got it.
So the 25th
I'm
would
fine,
work for you,
anything.
Michael?
Yeah, 25th will be fine.
Okay, would that work for you then? That Monday? Well, why don't we just
So
run
Monday
it on
the
that Monday?
the 25th, 5 to 7, make sure you have something to eat. 5:30 to 7:30, you tell us, we're gonna adjust to what works best for you. 5 to 7 work? Does that work?
John, that'll work for you, okay?
Yes, ma'am, so what was that again, the 25th?
The 25th,
Yes.
5 to 7 p.m., and we'll make sure you get something to eat, so don't worry about that. And we'll go over the,
Here?
yes, sir. All right.
Thank you.
Very good. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. We don't know unless you tell us, and that helps us a lot, so. All right, Mr. Cronick always likes to spend at least an hour with us in conversation, so we made sure that we put something in here that we could discuss. And I'm being a little sarcastic, but I'm also gonna ask your blessing in this short activity because, as I said, February, we trained with the Empower Board, and we had a very brief work session before the Maysville board meeting, but we really didn't attend to our board and policies the way I feel like we should. And with a new board, my recommendation is that each month, as we said, we truly review these. And so I'd like to ask that you they may or may not have their, you don't have your notebooks with board policies probably.
No, I didn't bring mine.
So we've got them electronically, and if we could bring those forward, we can even keep them here maybe from going forward, if you'll bring them next time. I'd like for us to look through some of the B policies, because those are the policies that govern the board. The rest of the policies are guidance for students, guidance for instruction, and they do govern the board as well, but section B is your section. And so I felt like this wasn't something we could just skim over, so I had a suggestion here, and that is that we use a very similar process, and we can move around a little bit, that we did when we went through advanced ed, and we each take one of those, we take 5 or 10 minutes to read through it with one of the staff members, and then we talk about any highlights or revisions that you see are needed. You do not have this printed, so in retrospect, probably should have printed them just because we didn't tell you to bring your notebooks, but we have them electronically, so we can show them to you, electronically. And I would ask that going forward, bring your board policy notebook, that blue notebook that Amanda gave you, because we're gonna add to it every month, the policies that we are updating. So, can we go through these policies that we have here? That I think it's really important that everybody understand executive session, how you develop a policy, what the board code of ethics, board conflict of interest, and then the nepotism. Those are the biggies. The ones at the top, if you just read those, BB, BBFA, BCA, those that you can see there. The BCBI is a policy that's kind of, it's not controversial, but it's getting some coverage right now in legislation. That's public participation. And so there is some legislation out there that we may be required to allow folks, we'd have to change our policy, because the legislation states that people would not be required to call ahead. Like, you couldn't have it in your policy that they could call ahead. They could just come and have to be given the right to participate. That's not final until the legislature's over, so we're gonna put a pin in that one, and we'll come back to it, because if that's indeed what comes out of legislation, then as of July 1, we'll have to revise our policy to align with state
I
policy.
think at that point, we call Tommy and tell him he's be here too.
That works for me. So right now, we do require, as you know, 3 days' notice. They're limited to 3 minutes, and there's quite a lengthy explanation of what the expectation is. So can we take about 5 to 8 minutes and pair up, each look through that policy? Todd has his laptop, I have mine, you've got yours, and so Carol and Anna, maybe sit down.
All these,
No, it's like you're not
One.
partners.
okay, we're just doing the
We're
conflict
doing
of
the
interest.
conflict of interest.
What's all the interesting?
You are with Ted.
Okay. I didn't even say, I must
So I think
We're, he's got
our
a-
task.
Yeah, but your highlights are in
Okay.
You see that?
Can.
I'll come that way, I'll come over there. There's more room over there.
Oh, do you want to I'm following you.
I made it through really long.
But I mean, this is. I mean, that's, yeah, yeah.
cut, don't you? What you got on there? Yep. Thank you.
That's what Tierney needs to go.
For what they realize in their lives.
You know, I don't see them as much as I probably should. My servitude says. I'm just pressing problems.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
It's kind of a new territory.
All right, are we ready? So just for the sake of the staff, the reason I felt like it's important, each of you, and we'll talk about this in our staff meetings as well, Mr. Nicholson knows that in July and August, he's gonna have some heavy lifting because section I is all about instruction. And we're gonna work together on section J, which is a lot of student stuff. So we'll be doing this throughout the year, and this is the board, so that's why the board's doing it, but from this point forward, the rest of them are ours, because they're internal functions, and we'll report to the board and ask you for your feedback, but it governs the way we do business within the school district. So since these are board policies, we'll go through those with your blessing. I appreciate you being willing to do this. I think it's important. It gives us an opportunity to revise or amend or make recommendations if we feel like we need to. So, if you'll notice at the top, I asked for all board members to look at internal organization. These are pretty basic, and I don't think that they would require any revisions. BB designates the chair and vice chair and the timing of that selection, so we could consider a revision to that. Right now, we'll table that. The next one is local school councils. I'm exploring with Brian Smith, our legal counsel, about just rescinding that. It is no longer required by law to have councils, and if we have something in policy, then it's expected that we're done. Would we encourage by procedure for our schools to have school councils? Absolutely, but it should probably not need to be in policy. VCAC, which is special board meetings, that's basic. It just, the superintendent or the chairperson can call a special meeting at any time, as long as you do the 24-hour notice and so forth. We do adopted agendas. We follow those rules. You know that at least 24 hours ahead of time, we have those posted, as well as pre-meeting agendas. So, public participation is the one that I suggested we table until we're able to, know what the legislature's gonna do. So that takes us then to the first one, which is executive session that Ms. Wheeler and I reviewed. So Ms. Wheeler, I don't know if you wanna speak to that one, or I'll let you, I'll share the affidavit.
Well, with closed sessions, we only can meet for specific items, and April's gonna share the affidavit with us that is required. Basically, it's just, personnel and, purchase of property and that kind of thing.
Student
And-
discipline.
And student discipline, yes, but that's all, it's called closed session for a purpose, it's not to be shared outside of that group. We do come back and share whether we've made a decision, or not, but that is, private information. So you may wanna talk to this.
Well, you have a copy of the affidavit. The most important thing is, so that you're aware, when auditors come in annually, if there's been an executive session that's listed on our board agendas, they want to see the signed and notarized affidavit that we truly talked about what we said we were gonna talk about. So there is a back checks and balances system in place, and that's something the auditors look for. So they'll look at our board agendas, and then they will look for a notarized clarification that we've done an affidavit. So that's why we do that. It's the right thing to do. All right, the next one is Ms. Dodge and Ms. Anglin.
The policy of development, and really it's pretty straightforward. It tells you the board's role and the community's role and superintendent's role in presenting policies or developing policies, and then the procedures as far as time frame, like when a new policy or revision to the policy is presented, it then has to lay on the table until the next board meeting, the next month's board meeting, unless it is an emergency. And then in that case, as long as the superintendent has presented and stated why it's considered an emergency situation, then it can be presented and voted on in the same meeting.
And did y'all see any revisions that you felt like were needed? Was it pretty clear?
Yes.
Okay. Okie dokie. Next one is Mr. Hollett and Dr. Blankenship, Code of Ethics.
So this really is, the ethical and conscientious operation of the board, not only as a whole, but as individuals. And so, it's very clear about what the expectations are. It's just like if you had your set of classroom rules posted, this is your set of classroom rules for the board. And so the first section talks about the governance structure, and what that should look like, and honoring the chain of command, and how the board, the authority of the board rests with the board as a whole and not with individuals of the board. And then the second section is about strategic planning. It's pretty self-explanatory there. Board and community relations is the third section, just about how the board should communicate regularly with students, staff, and the community. Policy development and how the board should engage in policy development. Section 5 is board meetings and just the expectations of members to attend and participate in regularly scheduled and called board meetings, and to be informed, to work with other board members, and really to follow the rules of engagement that are set out in this first section. Domain number 6 is personnel, and that speaks to only considering personnel after receiving and considering the recommendation of the superintendent. The superintendent is the one who can make that recommendation, and that the board should support the employment of the best qualified people to serve as employees of the school system, and that they should insist on regular and impartial evaluations of school system staff, and of course that they should comply with all laws and rules and regulations around personnel and employment of family members. Domain 7 is financial governance, and it just says, don't use your position to gain or benefit any person or entity over the interest of the school system. So, always put the school system first. And then the last part there is conduct as a board member. So there are 7 very specific actions that board members need to take. And one of those is filing annually with the local superintendent a written statement certifying compliance with the code of ethics. The only revision we saw was a grammatical change in section.
So if you'll just, is it grammatical, is that?
It
You can
is.
just make note of it, then Amanda and I
Yeah,
can
we
work on
did.
it. Perfect,
Mhm.
perfect. Okay, good. And Amanda did craft for us, and Ms. Wheeler, I'll give it to you. I'm trying to find them. Amanda, do you have them, or did you give them to me? I thought you did. I knew you did. I'll find them. She gave us a verification for us to sign off that we read the code of ethics, all of us. So, we'll get those to everyone before they leave. Good, right there. So I'll let you, if you don't mind, as a
Okay.
all right, next is board member conflict of interest. Mr. Nicholson, Mr. Parisi.
Ours was not as brief as yours, just for the record, so conversation was a little bit longer.
Gave it more time than right.
It did, it did. You wanna speak, or you want?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
So, ours, a conflict of interest, essentially, there's a litany of examples of how a board member could be in conflict of interest. You can't have a business, you can't be associated with a bank, can't be associated with any financial gain, really can't be an employee of the school system. Essentially, when you become a board member, your one and only role is as a board member. You can't have any other kind of benefit. You can't, unfortunately, you cannot go and make lots of money speaking. There's
As a board member.
as a board member, there's a $101 cap. You know, the only time that you essentially receive any financial compensation is either via travel, or your actual, what is it, Mr. Connick, how much do you get paid for the board meeting, $50? $50, so the financial gain beyond your $50 per meeting and your reimbursement for travel, anything other than that essentially would be a consideration of conflict of interest. Anything I left out? They also have a section that then, similar to the one that Dr. Blankenship went through, that then lays out the conduct of a board member, that you can't have any other county office, can't be employed by the State Department. So there are some other areas that, even though it's not the board, Jackson County Board of Education, there's some other areas that would be considered conflict of interest as well. Can't be in a governing body of any of our schools. So,
It still one question we did have some dialogue about, said you couldn't be an employee of the school system. And our interpretation of that was you couldn't be paid, but you could certainly, I guess, volunteer if there was something that you wanted to do, whether it was a community coach or in the classroom, in a lab setting or something.
Absolutely, mentor,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. You helped us years ago with, you weren't board member then, but engineering, when we had a lack
Well,
of
we actually
engineering
talked
teacher.
about that with the Power College and Career, if you wanted to be
Mhm.
working with some
Absolutely.
of the engineering students, as long as there's not a paycheck associated with it.
Yeah, for sure.
But
All right,
we
good.
did
Any
not have
revisions?
any, no, we talked, we did not see any necessary revisions.
Okay, very good, so check that box. Last but not least, Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Cronick.
Ours is, nepotism, and it's kinda short and sweet. It basically says that you can't be a board member and have a family member in an administrative position. Yep. And we found a couple of, just grammatical errors that's, Ted has got
Noted for
highlighted
us.
here.
It's
No,
on it.
nothing changed other than, the date was wrong, it's 2010, not
Okay.
2009,
Great,
so.
very good, and this was, I think too, in some instances, the board has, and I don't know, Ms. Wheeler and Mr. Cronick, y'all been here for a while. Sometimes you recuse yourself on votes that impact potential family members, is that?
Yeah. If there's something that comes
If
in.
it's,
Yeah,
but
I don't
that's
know
not,
if we really
it's not a
had
policy.
anything.
I don't know that we've had
Yeah.
anything, we've had no.
Which is good, it means we're following the policy.
Fortunately, yes.
So that's it, and unless there's any questions, I appreciate you taking that 15 or 20 minutes, Mr. Cronick, it's not right now, but we can review the top if you want
We're
to.
good. Clear?
I know, I'm teasing you.
But I'm next, Mr. Conley.
So, Ms. Wheeler has the code of ethics, if we want to sign those, then we'll keep those on file for our auditors as well. Sure, excuse me. And if you can just make sure that myself or Amanda gets those before you leave, and we'll have those and make sure we're following our own policies. And thank you again. And so next month, we will give you, updates on sections C and D.
Yeah, and one here.
Section C and D we'll look at next month, so I think that'll be very helpful. It'll be helpful for all of us, because I think we're gonna come across some things that even through legislation have changed a little bit, and we wanna make sure that we are being up to date with that information, so. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Davis, thank you so much.
Back to the right side. All right, so, thank you again. We'll go over, the next sections when we come back together next month. And again, that was the board's policy, so from this point forward, the staff will handle most of it and share with you and ask for any feedback, that they'll do the heavy lifting needed at this time, so appreciate that. All right, the exciting time. Mr. Nicholson, talk to us a little bit about our advanced ed visit.
Absolutely, and thank you again for making time to be here on Monday. We had a very, very positive exit conversation, unlike in years past where we've had a call meeting, they don't do a formal exit, so we have nothing in print. I want to talk to you through just briefly what the process looked like that you weren't involved in, and then I want to give you some of the findings that he shared. The findings makes it sound bad, there's absolutely nothing negative that he shared with us, but just some facts. They interviewed 176 people, so it's pretty impressive. 65 teachers and 44 students at the 6 schools that they visited, and the remaining 67 were parents, board members, the principals of the schools that were not visited, central office staff, business and industry. So certainly that's not, that's a pretty representative group, and that was all day on Monday. And then on Tuesday, they conducted 42 observations at 6 schools, and they visited East Elementary, East High, Maysville, Jackson County High School, and then Gum Springs and West Middle. And those 42 observations equated to 840 minutes, which was 14 hours of observations. So it's a little bit more than just a quick glimpse. And these folks were exhausted at the end of the day, and as we delivered them back, they then stayed up until 10 o'clock each night going through. So the report that we went through a couple weeks ago, it was very clear from the very first interactions that they read that. They had a lot of questions about that. And then what they were here to do was to determine whether or not everything that was in that report really was going to surface in conversations with all the different stakeholders. And it did at the end of that day. The lead evaluator, Bill, gave us a lot of a lot of subtle nods of this is going to be a really good review. And then they go out to the schools, and of course, again, it has to all line up. So what they look for, though, is it's no longer prescriptive like it used to be, where they'd say, okay, you're gonna have to hire an interventionist at every elementary school. They don't do it that way anymore. It's much more what they refer to as thematic. And they're looking at things in a variety of different capacities. First of all, it's do you have processes in place, and specifically processes for continuous improvement? We think of continuous improvement as being Mr. Johnson, and that is a department we have, but they're really looking at continuous improvement, whether it's academic, whether it's facilities, doesn't matter. It's are we continually evaluating our processes and getting better? But do you have processes in place? And then they look for the next, that's the level one. The next level is they're looking to see, are we monitoring those? So it's great to have processes, but are you monitoring to see that they're actually having an impact? And that the third level is, are you making adjustment to your processes based on your monitoring? So we'll use an example, transportation. We visited transportation, that came up, really looking at that over the last couple of years to get to a much better place right now. And so we had a whole ample list of processes, the way that we actually make adjustments. And the final one is, do you have evidence that it's having an impact over time? And over time for them is 3 years. And really, thanks in large part to the work that was done after our last visit and building out that strategic planning and having these meetings, our principal meetings, our assistant principal meetings, teaching learning meetings, all of our meetings always come back to those strategic goals. Because of that, we were in a really, really good place. So we won't get the final report. Mr. Craig has 10 business days to write it, and then it goes through 2 levels of review above him. And, excuse me, they have 30 days after that point, to 30 business days to get us our final report. And it'll contain some data from the observations. It'll contain ratings on 33 standards, and there are 4 different rating categories. And needs improvement is certainly one of those categories, and he said, I don't anticipate having a single rating, having a single standard for needs improvement. And made point that is pretty rare. So that, and he hesitated to say, like I say, he won't put anything in writing because there's 2 levels, but he kept coming back, now, I don't anticipate any changes, I don't anticipate, and just about everybody in the room here was at the conversation. It was really just a conversation between Mr. Craig and Dr. Howard, but they let us listen to that conversation. He'll give us a narrative that will be in more detail, let us better understand what they observed and the triangulation of those points that I mentioned with the observations and the data. We'll get the biographies of the people, and we got to know these people pretty well over a couple of days, but we'll get their biographies. And then something that's new is they'll give us an index of educational quality, and it will be a number between 100 and 400, and 264 is what he says is the number that you should be proud of. And he said, I can't give you your number, but you'll be very pleased. And I asked him if it started with a 4, and he said no. But when I pushed him a little bit more, he said it does. He's pretty confident it'll start with a 3. So if that's the case, then we'll definitely be very proud of that. I mean, we already are, but the high score would certainly help.
Say that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's the process. But what I'd like to do is tell you the 5 themes that they shared with us. And he said these 5 themes are centered around some big picture concepts that as the team would come back from schools, interviews, because they divide and conquer, and when they would come back and say, well, when we were interviewing the board member, we were interviewing these parents, they would start to collect, and they've got a synthesis analysis tool that they use. And so some of the things that, number 1 they said is Jackson County Schools is clearly about relationships, and you're going to see that in our theme, relationships at all levels. And he said there's a clear commitment to your vision. There's definite culture of collaboration and a commitment to continuous improvement. And so within those, these are the 5 things, and usually it is 3, you remember they used to refer to accommodations and recommendations. He said, you put us in a little bit of a difficult position because we don't really have any recommendations. So the way we're going to put it is we have 3 accommodations that are built on strengths, and then we have 2 next steps that are still built on strengths. Where do you go next? So the first one, and they're no particular order, but the first one was a commitment to resource management with processes that are aligned to our strategic plan. The first comment he made was, you don't get a fund balance like the fund balance you had, given where it was 5 years ago and where it is now, without really having a true commitment to the strategic plan and monitoring and really truly being good stewards of the dollars. And so that was a big part of it. Capital improvements, he mentioned that the way that the school system board is strategically improving our schools. And then a collaboration, highlighted a collaboration amongst the teaching, learning, and the operations. Said it's pretty uncommon for that to happen. Usually you have different worlds, and it was great. It wasn't staged or anything, but the day that they gave the exit review, Josh, Ted, and Dr. Howard and I were working on plans for the very initial discussions about what Jackson County High School could look like when it turns into the Empower College and Career Center. We had all these charts and everything up, and well, this is not uncommon. This is what we do. And definitely within that resource management, the fact that our funding, our professional learning, our instructional resources, anything we provide to teachers and schools is aligned to our strategic plan. So that was theme one. Theme two was a commitment to ongoing professional development and collaboration. Again, they indicated that our school district clearly values and utilizes collaboration across the district, from district office to schools. They made comment of the way that we operate with our principal meetings and assistant principal meetings, kind of a shared governance approach that we always bring them into the fold when we're making critical decisions. And that really carries down to our schools, that our principals feel valued, our teachers feel as if their voice is valued. They talked to students who said, I feel like I have a voice in Jackson County, I feel like people are listening, and that I actually play a role in terms of helping define what my instructional experience can look like. One of the things that they've really commented praised us for was our job-embedded professional learning, and that is something we've definitely been working towards, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. And they talked specifically about our math and ELA specialists, and they said, we hear all this good stuff, but we want to talk to teachers and see if this really happening? Are they coming out to your schools, and are they just pushing an agenda, or are they actually sitting down and trying to figure out what you need? And the feedback that the teachers gave was that they're very helpful and they provide exactly what is needed by personalizing support. So that spirit of collaboration was the second theme. The third theme is commitment to stakeholder engagement. That goes from everything from our community conversations to our business and industry partnerships. Empower College and Career certainly came up a good bit, but our parent advisory council, our teacher, our student advisory councils, and then they said, you also use survey data. Lots of people give survey data, but not everybody uses their survey data. And in conversations with parents, they asked because I don't know what they asked y'all, but they would ask, give me an example of, where is there a process that's being monitored? Where's there a process that you've been a part of that has actually affected some sort of change from your perspective? And they referred specifically to the calendar and transportation surveys, that parents felt like they'd been heard, they'd been informed, and that their opinion was valued through that process. And again, mentioned advisory councils, and that throughout their conversations and observations, that voices are heard and attended to. So that commitment to stakeholder engagement was the third. Accommodation, praise, and then the other two, it was interesting to listen to him couch them, because he said, I can't come out here and just sing a bunch of praises and spend all this money to validate what you're doing, because that's good, but we need to give you some growth opportunities. But the way he said it is, these are really potential areas of growth that are built upon strengths. And so the fourth one is that there's a definite commitment to the whole child. He talked about our student advocacy, about, even though they're intensely overworked, our social workers, some of the social emotional health supports that we have in place. And he said there's definitely the character development. We go beyond the academics in Jackson County. The academics are important, but we really do care about the kids. And he said that was pervasive everywhere. He said even high school, sometimes you don't see that, but it's different at every grade band, it's different at every school, but that was very clear that is a part of our culture. And highlighted a teacher that came in and heard Dr. Howard speak at New Teacher Orientation, and her saying that the most important thing is relationships, and she said, yeah, I've heard that before. And then now that she's interviewed almost a year into it, she said, it's true, they really care about relationships in Jackson County. So where's the recommendation moving forward? He said, that's wonderful work. Our next step suggestion for you is, how do you know that this is all having an impact? How are you going to monitor it? So go back to what I shared earlier about those themes that you're doing something, but then how are you monitoring it and what adjustments you're making? And that fits perfectly with our design thinking project that we've been doing this year with ensuring how do we go about making sure that every child has an adult who serves as a mentor, advocate, and graduation coach. We just started those prototypes. They're different at every school, but we just revisited that at the last principal and assistant principal meeting, and we had that very conversation. We've got to go back, talk to students. We're gonna have to have informal conversations, talk to parents, the surveys, and modify that process. So that is certainly something that we also agree that would be a logical next step. And then the fifth finding was our commitment to the power of formative assessment, specifically in this example, talking about our use of map data and how the use of map data has developed out a very proficient and recognized by the state MTSS process. And that was one of the things they said, clearly, you have now figured out how to put the formula together to begin to actually personalize the learning for students. And he said, it's clear that every school has a commitment to that, but what your next steps are is the skill sets of every school collectively are not in the same place. You have some schools that are executing the MTSS process with great precision, and you've got other schools that are just kind of beginning, or they still haven't hammered out that process. But he said the good news is the commitment is there, and so supporting them. And that's, again, that's very legitimate. We started with our elementary and then eventually moved to our middle, and we're having this conversation with high. It doesn't mean that every elementary has arrived, but we've spent more time with our elementary, and we're now working with our secondary. And so we appreciated those recommendations. And then something that was just really interesting to me is he did share preliminary the 42 observations that they did. And there's 7 categories when you go in and do the observation. And I compared those this afternoon to when we've done 156 of them. This is the Advanced Ed tool. We have our TEKS observation tool that we use, but we knew Advanced Ed was coming, and so Dr. Blankenship, Dr. Howard, myself, and then several of the teaching and learning team folks, I got credentialed on it, I trained everybody, and so we were just trying to explore the tool, and so when we go out and do school visits, we were using it. It's a 20-minute observation each time, and it was really amazing. There are 42 and our 156. The point values are off a little bit, but in order of the highest rated to the lowest, we were in the exact same order. So well-managed learning environment was the highest one, supportive learning environment, equitable learning, high expectations, active learning, progress monitoring, and then digital learning. And that order is just really kind of uncanny because they don't get to see ours, and we certainly didn't see theirs until they exited. And there'll be some really, really rich information that when we get the final report that I'd like to talk to you in a little bit more detail about where they are and what our next steps are. But all in all, it was a very favorable exit conversation, and I feel like because what we did is we just told the story of Jackson County where we are, and we own with pride the things that we're doing well, but we also didn't hide in the back of the closet the areas where we know that we need to make improvement. And I think that paid dividends. So, questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, because it takes a lot to get everything prepared for this visit. So I know there's quite a relief that this is now checked off the list, but we appreciate y'all going through all of that to make it happen. And I was very impressed with the two that Don and I got to be with, so it seemed to be very smooth. So,
We were, they didn't come in just to make us happy. I mean, they definitely dug, and they definitely asked some very difficult questions, but we're fortunate because we do have, and y'all are familiar with it now, if you look at that 5 years ago now, we've done a lot of really difficult work over a period of time, but we're in a much better place. And so when we get the final report, I certainly will share that with you, and that's public record, and most school systems then publish that on their websites as well.
Todd did a tremendous job with that, and one of the pieces that I was excited about is it really did support the next steps, and us having our parent advisory council in April. Hopefully even if we don't have the full report back, we can share this, because a natural next step is that community-based accountability. Because a lot of the pieces that they talked about were what you're investing in, the commitment that you've made to the whole child and the quality programs. You need to have a measure. How is that impacting kids? And so we need to look at, okay, so there's not a test, well, there are some tests for CTAE, but what's that impact to those kids in a fine arts program and an athletics program? So it's exciting, things that our parents value when you're going to start measuring. So it's great. Thank you, Todd. I think you've got one more piece, Martha and Troy. have a lovely fun, and Todd as well, Todd.
Tis the time of year.
Tis the season.
It's already started. We
Assessment
just included in there an assessment calendar, just so you're aware of it. We do that every year. It's already started. I don't know if Mark or Troy or Todd have any commentary that they'd like to make about that, but it's the same assessments that we do every spring. And I
And
like.
less than it used to be, but
Yeah,
still a
but
lot.
less than it used to be, and still there's conversation about potentially reducing that, every year that conversation comes back around. I'm not sure if you have
Well,
any commentary.
Martha and Teresa and their team and the teachers, leaders of school have done a great job with finishing up with our access assessments and taking those in. That's the assessment we give for language proficiency and growth to our English language learner students. So they've been finishing up with that piece. On Monday, we'll be rolling right into starting our spring math window. A lot of our teachers that are given the milestones and their students take the milestones this year are looking forward to getting that data back so they can go ahead and use that and being very strategic in these next 6 to 8 weeks as they prepare. Based on feedback from teachers and families and talking with staff, we were able to move the milestones back closer to the end of the year. And we have a lot more flexibility now from the state, which is great in terms of when they're giving. So what you'll see is a little bit different calendar from in the past where we've tried to spread them out over several days in many areas. We'll go through end of course and end of grade tests simultaneously with those Georgia milestones, and with the growth and the amount of technology that we've been able to have, we're going to be able to test multiple grades simultaneously. So gone are those years, for example, where we would test 3rd and 5th grade and then wait another week and come back and do 4th. That we can flex them all throughout, and we're not having to move devices back and forth. So, and as of right now, Martha, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of our state assessments through Access Now, Milestones, and CTA and AP, we're all online now.
Yes.
correct?
Your state requires 100% online, including the Georgia alternate assessment as well, so everything's online.
Doesn't seem that long ago when they told us that, we were like, holy cow.
I don't know.
Here it is.
Yeah, so.
But thanks to your approval of the SPLOST expenditure a little bit earlier, we've already,
Yes.
it is processed and Mike submitted and processed the purchase of the Chromebook, so that'll be very helpful.
Last question. So, all these are different assessment tests that's on this calendar? So we have, how many assessment tests are we doing like these?
Now fortunately, these are not all the same kids are not taking those assessments.
But sometime in their career, they're taking those.
Yes, sir.
Or maybe not, because if you're not an English language learner, you don't take access. And if you're not in an AP class, you don't take an AP class. And if you're not,
All right, so if you're,
so if you start with 2019, are you on the page there?
yes,
Access is only for students who are second language learners.
okay.
NAEP is not that,
That's a small group, it's just a pilot group that the state
yeah,
requires.
we don't get a choice on that.
Okay.
Milestones, the one that's listed there for retest, that is just mid-month for high school students who are taking an end-of-course like Alpha 1, they're having to retake it at the end of it. So
Sure.
that's just an opportunity, it's not a requirement.
Okay.
MAP assessment is one that we give, and that's local, that's our choice, but that's it. GAA is only for alternative students, which are students who are served in a self-contained, not always self-contained, but through an MI program. Cannot take the milestones based on their service. And then CTAE, unless you're in a CTAE program.
And it's always the 3rd class too, so it's not all CTA teacher students, it's kids that are finishing pathways.
Okay.
So that's an end of pathway assessment. And then milestones, that used to be all kids for 5 tests, math, science, social studies, reading, and language arts. Now, depending upon the grade, it's either 2 assessments or 4 assessments. So, not as many.
Okay.
Fitnessgram that's just a data tracking thing that we report for fitness.
Yes.
Advanced placement is only kids who are taking an AP test, which is approximately 200 kids for high school. And then ESC are those 8 courses at the high school level, 2 in math, 2 in language arts, 2 in science, and 2 in social studies. So only if those students are enrolled in that class do they take an ESC. And G-Kids is just kindergartners. So on one piece of paper, it is
It
a
looks-
lot,
looks
and it
very
is a lot.
daunting.
It is.
What's most daunting for her is Martha who's managing.
Managing all of
And
that.
don't get me wrong, the kid's taking the test, obviously, but as you just saw, there are very few that you have a subgroup that is taking multiple assessments.
How long have we done milestone testing? How many years have we done?
This is our third year with MAP, and
Okay.
Milestones is just replaced CRCT, so since the beginning of time.
2001.
You may want to share about the, what we're hoping with our
Yes,
map,
yes,
that we
GMAP.
can replace them.
Absolutely, so we did apply for and received permission from the state. We're in the state opened up, actually ESSA, federal government under ESSA, opened up an innovative assessment pilot program for states that were interested. Georgia's interested. Long story short, Georgia actually wrote legislation that mirrors ESSA. And so there are 3 consortiums, and Jackson County is in one of them, that submitted to the state and has been approved, that is now going to the U.S. Department of Education for hopeful approval. That what our goal would be, and we have a monthly meeting, is to, with MAP, to, right now, they're Georgiaizing very specifically MAP. I mean, there's a high level of alignment already, but this would be nothing but aligning to the Georgia state standards, because MAP gives more than standards, it's not standards-based, it also has your skills. But if this can happen, this GMAP consortium pilot, we would actually eventually phase out the milestones, and MAP would be our assessment that we would use in elementary and middle, and then eventually it would actually move to high school and replace some of the EOCs.
But not MAP as it is now.
Largely, it would not look very different to anybody. The difference is more behind the scenes in terms of the one thing that would be different is MAP doesn't have a writing component, and you do have to have a writing component in the state assessment. So that's one of the things in these monthly meetings. There are 7 school systems that are piloted, and actually it's pretty interesting. The last meeting, you now have Clark that wants to join, you have DeKalb that wants to join, we got some really large school systems that want to join our consortium, that even if it gets turned down by the U.S. Department of Education this time around, we have some real significant momentum. The other one is Cobb County is massive, but it is Cobb County, and we're talking about more pervasive across the state.
Sure.
So I feel hopeful. I'll tell you right now, I don't think this time we'll get it, because the state sent 3 pilots as one, and that's not what ESSA is looking for. They're looking at one statewide pilot, but if you don't ask, then you don't even get considered. But my hope is that what comes back is, it'd be great if it came back and said, sure, you have legislation that matches it, why don't y'all do that? But if not, the second but not so bad scenario is, we're really interested in this, and we think you should definitely emphasize this particular one. It has the most merit, and so why don't you resubmit next year?
So will will they then be testing more on the map, or will that time that milestones tested is no longer testing?
So you do have to show comparability. So right now, we do use the map and the milestones. And we would have to keep doing that for 3 years to show that we have some comparability. But then after that, we would just say bye-bye to milestones, and MAP would be our state-approved assessment system. And there's a whole litany of reasons why I think that's a really phenomenal move. I mean, familiar with assessment, you get more, and here's the really great part about it. If a child takes the milestones 3rd grade, and at the beginning of the year, and they demonstrate mastery and standards, they don't have to retake that portion of it. I mean, because it's an adaptive test. But likewise, if you didn't do really well, you've got the winter, and you've set your goal, and you see, I've made some improvement, but now I know I need to work in another area. Right now, as it stands, you work, you use all these other system and teacher-created tools, and we do the best we can to make sure that they're gonna be prepared for that test. But you get that one test on that one day per content roughly. There's more, it's a little bit longer. But it's a one shot, and there's no place else really in the world beyond the school where everything counts on that one day, and that one way of showing what you know as well. So
Has some alignment to ACT college readiness.
Yes, it's got a predictor.
It has a national norm that a state test cannot have. There's a lot of benefits of it.
I've looked at the map, and I like it a lot more than milestones. So
Provides a whole lot more.
I hope that it does.
There might be a time that I ask you to reach out to your legislators. We did that earlier, and they listened.
They do,
Yeah.
they're responsive.
Great question.
Very good. Thank you for asking. Again, I always ask, that's why we don't always know the answers, but if we don't, we'll find them. All right, Dr. Blankenship.
Okay, so the first up is our enrollment overview, and we have exactly the number of students this month that we had in August. So you can see which is bizarre, because normally what you see is a steady decrease over the year, you know, as students move out, but I think this speaks to the fact that we know, just that we know that we're growing, and so our enrollment is remaining steady. I was curious, about the change for some schools, well, for all of the schools, but in particular, a few of our schools that we know are growing, pretty rapidly. And so I looked at the growth from their enrollment at the beginning of the year to now, and just what that percentage would be. So it was a very simple calculation, a percentage increase. But by those calculations, our highest, fastest growing schools are North Jackson, Maysville, and West Elementary. And so,
Yeah. Exactly.
It's good to see Maysville.
yes, Maysville, in fact, had, percentage-wise, the highest growth. And if you look from what they were projected to be at in July, when we looked at the end of the year enrollment versus, where they are now, is a 10.2% increase. And North Jackson was 12.2.
So you said Maysville's got how many seats?
Maysville's a big
lot.
school.
Maysville can triple.
And Maysville could probably handle 800 to 900 kids if
Yeah.
you needed
Oh,
to,
yeah.
but certainly 700 easily. And right now, they're, as you can see, less than
Yes.
400.
Yep.
So there's plenty of room there.
All storage.
Yeah, well, we're cleaning it out, though. It's great. Go visit.
Yeah, so you also have the attendance data there for your review as well. North Jackson had the highest percentage of attendance again this month. Next, you have personnel recommendations, and you know, this is the month that we submit our certified personnel recommendations. We did leaders last month. So that is there for your consideration. I would point out under transfers, we have Allison Pennington, who will be transitioning with your approval into the principalship at East Elementary. We're very, very excited about that. I don't know if you wanted to say.
That we spoke about this last month, and I really apologize because we didn't celebrate her enough. So when she is there on Monday night, we're gonna celebrate her. Allison has been in our school district for quite some time. Remember her as a fourth grade teacher, great teacher. Todd could speak to her great skill, and it's been wonderful for her to spend a year and a half with Ms. Howling and to learn the culture at East Elementary. And that was a strong committee that they were critical. It wasn't an easy walk, but she really rose to the occasion. She's gonna do a fine job there. And you may wanna mention that they've proceeded with
Yes.
recommendation for an assistant principal as well.
They do have a recommendation for assistant principal, Lisa Ellis, who's been serving as their instructional coach. We're recommending that she transition to the assistant principal role.
It is
That'll be
great.
an extremely strong team there.
Oh, absolutely. Fantastic.
The last piece that, next to last piece is, I do have a job description, there that I'd like for you to consider. We won't vote on it this month, it'll lay on the table until next month, but we're not asking to fill this position right now. This is, just a job description for the role of Director of Student Support Services. I know at the retreat, we talked about the importance of all of the needs that we have in that area of mental health, safety, our social workers and the number of cases that they are supporting, as well as our school psychologist. And so we know as we grow as a district, this is going to be a great area of need for us. So I'm trying to get ahead of the game and prepare a job description that will that will define what that role should look like.
Our thinking is we need to look at the instructional classroom positions first, let's make sure we've got that good and solid and the other things, and then when we look at the budget, if this is something that might be, I mean, is there a need for it? Yes, but the classrooms are priority right now, so we definitely want to make sure.
Who handles this now for all these functions?
Ding, ding.
I
ding.
Spread out.
supports it,
Okay,
Dr. Howard supports.
Yeah, it's kind of spread among us,
okay.
different things. So, we have, this is Social Worker Appreciation Week, and we've been celebrating them, and they do great work, and they carry a lot of, but their role is supposed to be support, and oftentimes they find themselves having to play heavy-handed roles that they really should not be playing. And so this, whether it be through DFACS or Sheriff's Department, or just, all those kinds of things. All right.
I didn't know if you wanted to speak to the SRO.
I do, and this is, Kevin Poe, our county manager, and I have spoken, and Sheriff Mangum and I have spoken, and, this is really something that we're not yet ready to make a recommendation, but I wanted to put it out there for you to consider. Mr. Poe is out of the office today, or has been out of the office a little bit, and they have a pretty big issue going on, as you know, that's taking priority for them right now. But based on GMO visits and so forth, and many conversations with Sheriff Mangum, she would like to add 4 SROs. She wants to reinforce the SRO service at our elementary schools, and she wants, and we agree with this based on GMA's recommendations, to have at least 2 at each high school, because just one, it's a little bit difficult to coordinate efforts into, and so, if they are recommending 4, they're asking that the Board of Education split that cost, we pay for 2, and the Board of Commissioners would pay for 2. So they're working on a proposal with a memorandum of understanding, and I told them that I would bring that to you for consideration. I think it's one of those things that we look at the March 25th, the 25th retreat when we talk, look at our budget. If it is something we can afford, I think it's probably wise for us to consider that. But any additional information that you might want in terms of what they do now and how they're being served and so forth, I'll be happy to ask Sheriff Mangum to come visit with us. It's, we can speak from a school perspective, our principals can speak from a school perspective, but anything that you would like, but that's on the table for your consideration. All right, any other human resources pieces? It's a busy time of year.
It is a
Dr. Blankenship
very
is-
busy time of year.
She's on the
Yes.
treadmill at 10, just like everybody else. All right. We've got some good news for you next in the packet there, with the general fund, and Ms. Dodge, I'll let you share the news there.
I just love that month after month that Dr. Howard introduces this part, finances, as the good news. So,
But
because
there
for
were
so
several
long,
years that it was
yeah, that's what she's
amazing.
thinking, say, it was so long that it was like, okay, well, don't freak out when you see this, but we're really working hard. But again, it's just a great thing to see that our fund balance continues to remain steady. And, of course, we have gotten in the majority of our tax revenue, so now you are gonna start to see that fund balance decline throughout the next few months of the fiscal year. Just because we are now using those tax revenues for operations. But it still remains significantly higher than previous years, and if we continue I know I've said this, but if we continue the trends, I have no doubt that we'll end well above 12 million. And if it continues the way it is now, it could be more than that. So, but it's a good thing, because with our growth, we're gonna have to rely, I think, a little bit on that. But as long as we maintain between 9.5 and 11.5 to 12 million, then that keeps us out of the area of having to have a TAN. So, that keeps us, it's probably, well, let's say more, now that the growth and we have more staff, 10 million to 12 million
Yeah, I was
is a
gonna
good
say,
fund
as our
balance.
budget grows, that fund balance will
Mhm.
grow proportionally.
But we are in a good place, and if you wanna look at the financial summary report, you can see that, right now, we're actually 1%, our overall expenditures are 1% below where we are at this point in the year, 67% of the year completed, and, we've expended about 66%. So we're still very much in line with actual as compared to budgeted. We'll probably see a little jump over the next couple of months, because of the deadline for schools to make purchases for this fiscal year, and it's approaching. So we'll probably see them start to really, finish using up those discretionary funds. But, other than that, everything else is looking good, and even though SPOS, if you wanna look at it, even though SPOS went down a little bit this month from last month, it's
still
over
50,000
six hundred,
year over year.
and year over year is still significantly higher, so. So it's also still continuing the trend that we wanna see, so.
Absolutely. That's good.
All right, very good.
And then March 25th we'll present tentative budget and tentative recommendations for you guys for next year.
Which will include, some additional personnel recommendations that we'll have that as part of the budget, and that'll be for you to determine by priority. We'll make our recommendation to you with that. And Ms. Dodge, you have one more thing that we added on here, and you'll speak to that. We talked about it a little bit
Yes.
about the retreat, but,
Yeah, we
it will be
discussed
an
the
action item,
retreat.
So we put it on this.
Yeah, on the form, on the executive summary form, and as an action item. But we did discuss at the retreat, or I requested that that you consider changing the contract period for teachers, for our 10-month teachers from September through August to August through July. And there's so many school systems that have already done this, so it's a situation where when we get folks from these other systems, and we have to kind of, adjust their pay and spread it over more months. Same thing with brand new teachers, and it can get very confusing and convoluted for the employee to understand kind of why it's different from the system that they used to be in.
And if they're making the same amount that they were in the previous system, their take-home pay is actually less because it's divided over, it
13
looks less,
months.
Yes.
it's divided over 13 months
Yeah,
rather than
it's
12.
Mhm. But if you were to approve this change, then basically, besides helping out the employees, it would be a huge benefit to the finance and payroll department, because basically we would have two pushes of salary. We would do the 12 months in July, and then August would be everybody else. And it would keep us from having to go back and reanalyze and recalculate based on all the special situations. So, as far as additional costs, like I mentioned at the board retreat, there is no additional cost. It's more of a cash flow issue, because in August, they would receive their last payment from this fiscal year, and then their first salary payment for next fiscal year in 1 month. But that's only the 1 year until they got on the new cycle.
That's the only time that would happen,
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and overall, as far as when those expenses are recognized in the financials, it has no impact for expense.
So is this gonna be an action item?
It is,
for
right,
sure?
it is for you to consider, and we'd like to make it an action item. It needs to be an
Yeah.
action item for us
Yes.
to change the structure, so
Yeah.
if this, like I said, we've given you kind of the executive summary, if you wanna read over that, if you have any questions. Anna will be here tomorrow and Monday, and you can give us a call, come talk with us. This is something that if you do decide to move forward with this, we probably need to go talk to all the schools and help them understand.
Yes, and
Because
that's
they
in there
need-
as part of the
Right.
action items, is to ensure that there are in-depth discussions with the employees affected, so that they understand what the impact's gonna be, and that that's just a one-time thing, that's not gonna happen.
And should they
every year.
leave, they actually have one less paycheck than what they would have thought, so they're gonna get their last paycheck to July instead of August. They're probably doing that.
Yes, yes,
So
from
for the
now,
following
yes.
year, so
Mhm.
while they're getting one now, it's all shifted.
Yes, yes.
So if we didn't start school so early, this would be a problem.
I am gonna plead the fifth on that. I think that's not my lane, so, you can discuss that with the appropriate people.
Right. All right, two more quick items, and I'll turn it over to Ted and Josh and David and anybody else that's here for
Good, well,
facilities and
I'll give you
operations.
a quick report on the high school project. As you know, it's been raining pretty consistently, but contractors have stayed working on the site every day it's not raining, or every moment actually it's not raining. And we've had a really good success with the erosion control. It's a difficult site, as you might imagine. but everybody's done a really good job. We're having our architect inspect the site twice a week. Josh and I are there regularly. I got stuck over there the other day in the mud. It's proof that I was there. GeoHydro, our site soils testing group, is there regularly, about daily, and so we're watching over it very carefully, and of course Bowen and Watson is. We release our steel and concrete package about 10 days from now, and then we follow about a month later with the balance of the main building and athletics. So, pardon me, a lot to take place in the next month or so. So we'll be bringing you more and more information on that. And then the last item is the road closure, and I'll let Mr. Farmer speak to you about that on Spur 82.
Amanda, I don't know if you want to pull up in the assembly, you will see a copy of the letter we received as well as the letter dated. It's going to say.
We do have a bridge that's closing on Highway 82 Spur at the Hurricane Shoals area. It is planned for closure on March 18th and will be hopefully reopened around September, the October time period, hopefully more September. But we have brought in our drivers of the routes that this has affected. We have prepared a letter, as you see here. We have adjusted our routing schemes for the drivers that are impacted heavily, which will be around 2 routes, 10 total. But we were able to take drivers and adjust their starting point times, so those will not be impacted. The main ones, we are bringing in the drivers, and they are going to, with myself, call each parent on these particular routes to make sure that the parents are informed of how the routes will be changed. This letter will also go out to those affected students, and we also will be, we've already reached out to the principals and made sure that they were aware of this situation. So I feel like we are doing everything that we can do to make this transition for that time period as painless as possible.
Don't jump in your car and try to run to Maysville because it's going to be a different route. Maybe that's
It will.
reminded through September.
Yes, through
So you said
September.
March
March 18th will be the
March 18th
closure
through
date.
September.
Monday week.
Monday week, that's correct, and then hopefully, we're hoping from the estimation of the contractor and the letter that we received, we're looking at September. Weather permitting.
Thank you, David, for, I appreciate the fact that those bus drivers are gonna call each of those parents to make sure they understand. 'Cause it's probably, what, 15-20 minute adjustment, but picking up 15 minutes earlier is picking up 15 minutes
It pretty much, to put it concisely, it pretty much is turning the route backwards. So at that time, you're looking at a 15 to 25 minute delay from one end to the other, so,
Are our bus drivers hourly?
yes, sir, they are.
How much more is this gonna, how much more time are they gonna be at the bus then?
So the worst case scenario, you're looking at 30 minutes. Yes, sir. Some of them will be 10 to 15 minutes. The majority, we're looking at 10 to 15 minutes. The worst case on the 2 that I mentioned, you're looking at 30, 35 minutes.
Great question.
And I will say this, you know, the traffic flow, the way traffic will be detoured could impact that also, but we're giving worst case scenarios here so parents can prepare themselves. And I will say too, they've got these big huge signs up, if you've been down that road, I know it was in the paper, so I feel like they're doing as much as they can to help people.
So we've thrown a lot at you tonight. Certainly appreciate your time and your willingness to kind of go through the policies and take a look at some of these things. Todd, thank you again, and to all the staff for outstanding job on this. And we look forward to that full report. Just a reminder, West Jackson Elementary School, 6 o'clock, if you can be there, 6:30 at the latest. We'll have personnel recommendations. We'll have your blessing, the recommendation for the boundary adjustment as an action item, and then the action item for the adjustment to the pace, annual pay cycle, so bumped back by 1 month. And other than that, I think we may have a few, we didn't end up with a surplus. I'm not sure if we ended up with a surplus, not much. If we didn't, okay, very good. So that should be it. It shouldn't be too heavy on that.
Okay.